Alexander the Great almost died in his very first battle. A Persian axe cracked his helmet open. 1 inch deeper, no empire, no legend, nothing. And that battle? It's ranked last on today's list. Today we are ranking Alexander the Great's 7 greatest victories from worst to best. Not by body count, not by how famous they are. We're judging them across 5 key factors: tactical brilliance, difficulty and odds against him, personal risk to Alexander himself, strategic impact on his entire campaign, and innovation, engineering, night marches, and creative flanking. The higher he scores across all 5, the higher the rank. Let's start at the bottom. The worst battle of Alexander is Battle of the Granicus, 334 BC. Alexander is 21 years old. He has crossed the Hellespont into Persian territory with roughly 40,000 men. This is it, the first real test. And the Persian satraps, the regional governors, have assembled their cavalry on the eastern bank of the Granicus River to stop him right here, right now. His generals advise him, wait. The riverbank is steep, the current is strong, we'll be cut down as we climb. Camp here. Attack at dawn when we have the advantage. Solid advice. Textbook military logic. Alexander looked at them, then looked at the river and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I did not cross the Hellespont to be afraid of a river. And he charged. Now here's what the history books make sound heroic, but is actually terrifying when you think about it. Alexander personally led the charge across the river in his full royal armor, with a white plume on his helmet. He made himself the most visible target on the entire battlefield. The Persians immediately spotted him and sent their best cavalry commanders directly at him. 2 Persian nobles attacked him simultaneously. One threw a spear, Alexander deflected it and killed the first man. The second, Spithridates, came from behind and swung his battle axe. The blow cracked Alexander's helmet and drove through to his skull. 1 inch deeper. He's dead. It was only Clytus, riding beside him, who severed Spithridates' arm before the second blow landed. Alexander won the Battle of Granicus. The Macedonian cavalry broke the Persian line and routed them completely. But here's why it's ranked last on this list. The victory happened despite Alexander's recklessness, not because of it. He made himself a target. He nearly died. He relied on luck and the heroism of one soldier to survive. A great result, an imperfect performance. That gap between result and performance, that's what this ranking is about. And that gap gets smaller and smaller as we move up this list. Next battle is Siege of Halicarnassus. Same year, 334 BC. After Granicus, Alexander moves south along the Aegean coast, taking city after city. Most surrender, smart ones. But then he reaches Halicarnassus. Halicarnassus was the capital of Caria, a heavily fortified port city sitting on a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by water. Inside, a massive Persian garrison commanded by a Greek mercenary general named Memnon of Rhodes. And Memnon was good, arguably the best military mind Persia had. He had reinforcements coming by sea, he had supplies, he had walls that had been built to withstand exactly this kind of assault. Alexander arrived and immediately began siege operations, battering rams, siege towers, sappers undermining the walls. Memnon hit back, sorties, night raids, burning Alexander's siege equipment. This went on for weeks. And here's the part that never gets talked about enough. Alexander did breach the walls. He actually got through, but Memnon had built a second wall behind the first, and a third fortified citadel behind that. And while Alexander was fighting through rubble, Memnon and his forces calmly loaded onto ships in the harbor and sailed away. Alexander took the city. But he couldn't take the citadels. He couldn't take the harbor, and the man who'd made his life miserable for weeks, Memnon, escaped completely. Alexander burned what he couldn't hold and moved on. A win, but a messy, incomplete, costly win. And the reason it sits above Granicus? Because the enemy here was genuinely dangerous, genuinely skilled, and Alexander still made it work. But it showed his weaknesses more than his strengths. It's ranked 6th. Now let's go to a battle where the numbers should have destroyed him, and the reason they didn't is one of the most elegant tactical exploitations in military history. Next one is Battle of Issus, 333 BC. 1 year later, Alexander has been moving through modern-day Turkey and into Syria, and Darius III, the King of Kings, the Emperor of the Persian Empire, has had enough. He personally takes the field. Now, the ancient sources give wildly different numbers for Darius's army. Some say 100,000, some say 600,000. Modern historians settle around 100,000 to 200,000. Alexander had roughly 40,000. This should not have been a contest. And Darius chose his ground. He moved his enormous army to cut off Alexander's supply lines from behind. Alexander turned around to face him. And here's what changed everything, and this is the part that drops Issus to rank 5 instead of higher. The battlefield at Issus was a narrow coastal plain, mountains on one side, Mediterranean Sea on the other, a frontage of maybe 3 kilometers. Darius's 100,000 men were crammed into a corridor where maybe 30,000 could actually fight at any moment. His numerical advantage became almost irrelevant. Alexander formed his famous oblique line, the Macedonian phalanx on the left, his elite companion cavalry on the right, and attacked Darius's weaker left flank directly. The phalanx held the center, the cavalry smashed through. Darius, seeing Alexander personally charging toward him, turned his royal chariot and fled. When the king runs, the army collapses. Alexander captured Darius's wife, mother, and daughters. He sent them back in perfect comfort and honor, brilliant psychologically, brilliant politically. But here's the honest truth, and why Issus sits at 5. The terrain helped him enormously. The narrow battlefield neutralized Persia's biggest weapon, manpower. Alexander didn't choose that terrain. Darius accidentally gave it to him by choosing his position poorly. The victory is real. The genius is real. But he was aided by the ground. The next battle on this list, Alexander had no such help. He had to build his advantage from nothing, literally from the sea.
After this, the siege of Tyre is discussed. 332 BC. After Issus, Alexander moves south toward Egypt, and every city on the Phoenician coast surrenders. Every city. Except one. Tyre, the most powerful merchant city in the ancient world, and, critically, it was built on an island, half a mile offshore, surrounded by deep water, with walls rising 45 meters directly from the sea. The Tyrians sent Alexander a message.
You can have our loyalty, you can have tribute, but no army has ever taken this city. You cannot enter our island. Alexander sent back a simple reply, I am coming to sacrifice at the temple of Melkart inside your city. His generals looked at the island, then at the sea, then back at Alexander. How? Alexander's answer was insane. We build a road into the sea. He ordered his engineers to demolish the ruins of old Tyre, which sat on the mainland, and begin dumping stone, rubble, and timber into the Mediterranean. They were building a mole, a causeway, from the mainland directly to the island, 1 kilometer into the open sea. The Tyrians thought it was a joke. They sailed out and laughed at the Macedonians. Then they sailed out and shot arrows at them. Then they launched fire ships, vessels packed with burning material, and destroyed Alexander's siege towers sitting on the causeway. For 7 months, this went on. 7 months. And here's the moment the Tyrians understood they had miscalculated. Alexander didn't stop. He widened the causeway. He brought in siege ships from Sidon, from Cyprus, from Greece to cover his flanks. He built new, taller siege towers on the causeway. Towers so tall they looked down onto the 45-meter walls. And after 7 months, he breached the walls from 3 directions simultaneously. The Macedonians poured into Tyre. What happened next was brutal. Tyre had resisted for 7 months, killed Alexander's men, desecrated his envoys. He sold most of the population into slavery. But here's what matters for this ranking. No army before Alexander had ever taken Tyre from the sea. No army before him would have tried what he tried. He didn't just win a battle, he redefined what was possible in military engineering. And he did it through sheer, grinding 7-month refusal to accept the word impossible. This is rank 4. It gets better from here. Next battle of our list is Battle of Gaugamela. 331 BC. Darius survived Issus. He ran, but he survived. And in the 2 years since, he had rebuilt. Not just rebuilt, overbuilt. Modern estimates put his force at somewhere between 90,000 and 200,000 men. He brought scythed chariots, wheels fitted with spinning blades to shred infantry. He brought 15 war elephants. He chose his own battlefield this time, a flat, open plain near Gaugamela in modern Iraq. Why flat and open? Because at Issus, the terrain had neutralized his numbers. He was not going to let that happen again. He literally had his engineers flatten the ground to remove any obstacles for his chariots. He had prepared this battlefield specifically to destroy Alexander. Alexander arrived, looked at the field, and said, famously, to his general Parmenion, "I will not steal my victory." Meaning, no night attack, no tricks, full battle, open ground. You need to understand how absurd this was. Alexander was outnumbered, conservatively, 3-1, on a flat plain, against an enemy who had specifically prepared this ground to kill him, and he said, "Let's fight fair." What happened next is studied in military academies to this day. Alexander arranged his infantry phalanx in the center. But he deliberately angled his line, marching obliquely to the right. Darius had to stretch his line to keep up, and as his line stretched, gaps appeared. Alexander had planted a reserve force specifically to hold the center when those gaps became a problem. Then, when the moment came, he identified the largest gap in Darius's line, formed a wedge with his companion cavalry, and punched through it at full gallop. Not around the enemy, through them, directly toward Darius. Darius, again, fled. The Persian Empire, which had existed for 200 years, effectively ended on that plain that day. But here's why Gaugamela is third and not higher. Alexander created his advantage brilliantly. The oblique advance, the feigned gap, the timing, all genius. But Darius gave him the opening by stretching his line too far. And Darius's decision to run saved Alexander from having to fight through the very best of the Persian cavalry. Alexander won. But the enemy's mistakes played a significant role. The next 2 battles on this list? No such luck. After the Battle of Gaugamela, we discuss the Battle of the Persian Gate. This is the battle nobody talks about, and it almost ended everything. 330 BC. After Gaugamela, Alexander is marching toward Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire, the final prize. Standing between him and Persepolis is a narrow mountain pass, the Persian Gate. The Persian satrap Ariobarzanes had 40,000 men. He had built a wall across the pass. And when Alexander marched his army through, it was a massacre. Boulders rained from the cliffs, arrows from every direction. The narrow pass meant the Macedonians couldn't maneuver, couldn't form their phalanx, couldn't fight back effectively. Alexander ordered a retreat. Read that again. Alexander retreated. This man who charged across the Granicus River, who spent 7 months building a road into the ocean, who attacked a 200,000-man army on an open plain, retreated. Because he had no choice. He had walked into a trap, and his men were dying. He set up camp. He needed a new plan. And then a local shepherd came to his camp. The shepherd knew these mountains. He knew a secret path, narrow, difficult, obscured, that went around the Persian gate and came out behind Ariobarzanes' position. What Alexander did next is either genius or madness, depending on your perspective. He left a small force at the main pass to keep the campfires burning, to make noise, to make it look like the entire army was still there. Then, in the middle of the night, in winter, in the mountains, he personally led the main force along the shepherd's path. No torches. In darkness. Through snow. At dawn, they emerged from 2 directions simultaneously. The force at the main pass launched a frontal assault. Alexander's force hit from behind. Ariobarzanes' army, 40,000 men, was surrounded, confused, and destroyed in hours. This is rank 2, not rank 1. But here's why it's so close to the top. Alexander lost. Then he recovered. Then he found a creative solution nobody else would have found. Then he executed it under impossible conditions in the dark. The difference between rank 2 and rank 1, at the Persian gate, he had a shepherd to help him. At our number 1 battle, he had nothing but his own mind. Next one is Battle of the Hydaspes, 326 BC. Alexander has conquered Persia. He has conquered Egypt. He has marched further east than any Greek or Macedonian ever imagined, and now he stands at the banks of the Hydaspes River in modern-day Pakistan. On the other side is King Porus. Let me tell you about Porus. Unlike Darius, who ran twice, Porus was a warrior king. He was reportedly over 7 feet tall. He commanded his army from the back of his elephant, and he had something that had never seriously threatened Alexander before. 200 war elephants. These were not zoo animals. These were trained, armored, terrifying war machines. Macedonian horses, who had never seen elephants before, would refuse to approach them. A horse smells an elephant and stops, won't move, no matter how hard you kick. Alexander's core tactical weapon, the companion cavalry charge, was neutralized before the battle even began. Now add to this, it was monsoon season. The Hydaspes River was flooded, swollen, fast-moving, hundreds of meters wide, and Porus had positioned his army on the far bank, watching every point along the river, waiting for Alexander to cross. Anytime Alexander's scouts moved toward the river, Porus moved his army to match. For weeks, Alexander probed the river. Every day, he had his cavalry make noise at different crossing points to keep Porus moving, to exhaust his army, to make the movements seem routine. And then, on a stormy night, Alexander moved. He had identified a bend in the river 27 kilometers upstream, hidden behind a wooded island. He took roughly 15,000 men, his best troops, and crossed there. In a storm, at night, in a flooded river. And here's the tactical masterpiece. He didn't just cross and attack, he split what he had into 3 separate forces. The infantry he kept with him. His cavalry, led by himself, he split into 2 wings. When Porus's cavalry came to meet him, Alexander attacked from 2 directions simultaneously, before his infantry had even reached the battle. The cavalry battle was already over by the time the phalanx arrived. Porus reformed around his elephants. The phalanx locked the elephants in place, not attacking them, just preventing them from maneuvering. And the cavalry went around both flanks. The battle lasted maybe 8 hours. Alexander lost roughly 300 cavalry and 1,000 infantry. Porus lost 23,000 men. But here is what elevates this above everything else on this list. What happened after? When Porus was brought before Alexander, wounded, captured, the battle lost, Alexander asked him, "How do you wish to be treated?" Porus, standing straight, blood on his armor, said, "Like a king." And Alexander, who had burned cities, who had crucified the people of Tyre, who had left a trail of conquest across 3 continents, gave him back his kingdom, not as a prisoner, not as a vassal, as an ally, a peer, a king, because Alexander recognized what we should recognize right now. Porus was the most worthy opponent he had ever faced, and the Hydaspes fought against the best general under the worst conditions, with his core weapons neutralized using improvised tactics designed in the field, is the greatest battle of Alexander the Great's career. Not because of the size of the victory, because of the size of the problem he solved. So here's what this list actually tells us. Granicus, he won through recklessness and luck. Halicarnassus, he won through persistence but couldn't finish it clean. Issus, he won brilliantly, but the terrain helped him. Tyre, he won through engineering and sheer refusal to quit. Gaugamela, he won through tactical genius, but the enemy's mistakes opened the door. Persian Gate, he lost, recovered, and won through creative problem solving in the dark. Hydaspes, he won with every disadvantage stacked against him, improvising a 3-pronged assault in a monsoon across a flooded river against 200 elephants, and then showed grace in victory. Here's what's remarkable. Every general on this list, every satrap, every Darius, every Memnon, every Porus, thought they had found the thing that would stop him. The river, the walls, the numbers, the terrain, the elephants. Not one of them did. And the reason isn't that Alexander was lucky. The reason is that Alexander got better with every battle. Compare the 21-year-old who almost got his skull split at Granicus to the 30-year-old who crossed a monsoon river at night and coordinated a 3-part cavalry assault before dawn. That is not talent. That is evolution. And that is why we still talk about him 2,350 years later. If you found this interesting, if this changed how you see ancient warfare or leadership or what it means to genuinely get better at something, hit that subscribe button. Comment below which battle surprised you most. I'll read every single one. Let's go.